After his victory over Cory Sandhagen, Merab Dvalishvili issued a call-out to Petr Yan. Merab isn't one to take the easy route. He always seeks out the best competition, never shying away from challenges. The issue, however, is that the current UFC roster is weaker than ever, leaving Dvalishvili with few meaningful opponents. Meanwhile, Petr Yan has been steadily stacking victories, and many fans anticipate his return to championship contention. Their matchup is set for UFC 323 in December, specifically on the 6th. Back in 2023, I predicted on my Telegram channel, link in description, that Yan wouldn't handle Dvalishvili. At the time, very few believed me. The reality was that Yan had clearly lost his rhythm in the octagon. His pace slowed considerably, and his once effective style began to falter. The underlying problem is that Yan is a point fighter, someone who wins by accumulating strikes rather than overwhelming dominance. Fighters like Yan and Rafael Fiziev often face challenges because they lack a dedicated coach. Essentially, they train themselves, spar irregularly, and hit pads or mitts inconsistently. This approach rarely produces top-tier results. It's even worse when a fighter shows up to a camp without a structured program. Some gyms allow their athletes to do their own thing, which may lead to sporadic improvement but rarely translates into elite performance. Yan's decline can be traced back to his bout with Cory Sandhagen. Sandhagen, a highly technical fighter, simply exposed Yan's weaknesses. While Yan had historically managed such opponents through precision and timing, Sandhagen's style created significant challenges, resulting in a matchup that many expected Yan to lose on points. Yet he was awarded the win barely. The subsequent fight with Aljamain Sterling was even more telling. In the first round, Yan chased Sterling across the octagon, while Sterling countered effortlessly. By the second and third rounds, Yan's struggles in grappling and control became painfully obvious. He only began to regain some composure in rounds 4 and 5, highlighting how much his skill set had deteriorated. This decline is not new. It was noticeable as far back as 2019 when Yan faced Uriah Faber. Even then, it was clear that a fighter with a higher volume of output could overwhelm him. This scenario unfolded repeatedly in his later matches. Yan's first encounter with Dvalishvili starkly demonstrated this vulnerability. His rhythm failed him against an opponent who specializes in relentless grappling. For the last decade or more, the only fighters truly dominating MMA have been those with aggressive grappling styles. Think Khabib Nurmagomedov, Charles Oliveira, and now Islam Makhachev. These athletes dictate the pace, leaving opponents with little room to implement their game. Dvalishvili replicated this model perfectly. He nullified Yan's striking efficiency, forced the action to the ground, and rendered Yan's once formidable grappling largely ineffective. Sterling, as a teammate of Dvalishvili, further illustrates the advantage of fighters who share a camp and understand each other's strategies. Yan's apparent helplessness during these encounters sparked discussions among fans, some claiming he was injured, jet-lagged, or underprepared. Yet the truth is simpler. Dvalishvili was operating on a different level. He was just superior, both tactically and physically. Now, why is Merab Dvalishvili so formidable? Some have dismissed him as awkward or unremarkable, but his dominance comes from relentless attacking wrestling. Many MMA fighters treat grappling as an afterthought, but Merab makes it his weapon. Unlike other opponents who may boast about elite skills but falter under pressure, Dvalishvili executes a high-level game plan with precision. His improvement in striking has made him even more dangerous. Whereas critics could once find flaws, he now combines grappling with efficient, sharp striking. Cory Sandhagen himself admitted he nearly got finished, underscoring Merab's pressure and relentless cardio. The Georgian fighter moves efficiently, never wasting energy, and no one has successfully dictated a fight's pace against him yet. Stylistically challenging fighters have been rare. Murat Jumayev, for example, couldn't perform due to injury. Dvalishvili simply overwhelms opponents, taking space and dictating the rhythm, which plays perfectly against Yan, who struggles when pressed and forced to react. Even in fights against opponents with limited ground skills, such as Sean O'Malley or Sandhagen, Merab's approach has consistently resulted in domination. He applies consistent pressure, controls the octagon, and leaves no room for his adversary's usual strategies. Against Yan, the same pattern is likely to repeat. If Dvalishvili executes his game plan, Yan will struggle to impose his style, and the rhythm that once made him successful will work against him.
Let's talk about Yan's so-called resurgence and the narrative that he's reloaded his career to reclaim the throne. His first post-hiatus fight was against Song Yadong in Miami, after being out for an entire year. A year-long break is unusually long for a fighter of Yan's caliber. Even though he may have trained during that time, long periods without actual competition inevitably dull timing and rhythm. Yan's camp at Tiger Muay Thai, while reputable for producing tough athletes, has also been criticized for lack of structured oversight. Fighters there often train independently, which can lead to inconsistent preparation. Yan's manager, Rafael Fadhiv, has repeatedly stated that he personally cornered Yan and helped design his fight strategies. However, there have been instances where Yan's own team was denied access, leaving local coaches in the US to handle his corner duties. In the Miami bout, Yan once again looked sluggish. His pace was off, retreating often and failing to establish his typical offensive flow. The sheer number of strikes he threw in the first round was surprisingly low for a fighter known for high-volume output. Song Yadong, with his ability to control exchanges and intercept Yan's strikes, exposed these weaknesses. Had Yan not recovered mid-fight, he might have even lost that bout. Next came Davison Figueiredo. This matchup was complicated from the start because Figueiredo is naturally a flyweight, not a bantamweight like Yan. Additionally, Figueiredo's age and experience at lighter weights put him in a unique position. He has already been beaten by fighters like Cory Sandhagen. Despite this, Yan was unable to finish him decisively. While one might argue that Yan still had the tools to score a knockout, the fight demonstrated that his skill growth had plateaued. Yan's latest fight against McGhee highlights a recurring pattern. Yan chose not to sit idle and decided to fight frequently. However, against an opponent who appeared out of nowhere, Yan struggled to assert the usual dominance expected from him. His preparation, timing, and rhythm were not at peak levels, reflecting a plateau in his development. Simply put, Yan's skills haven't been growing even as he takes more fights. Summing up these observations, it becomes clear why Merab Dvalishvili is positioned to defeat Petr Yan again. The Georgian's strengths, relentless wrestling, efficient striking, and unmatched cardio directly exploit Yan's weaknesses. Yan is at his most vulnerable when pressured, when forced to adapt to opponents who control the pace, and when grappling dominates the fight. Dvalishvili fits that description perfectly. Couldn't Merab lose? Of course. Nothing in MMA is guaranteed. Frequent competition has a toll. Constant training camps and fights can lead to overtraining, fatigue, and wear on the body. Just as Canelo Alvarez has shown in boxing, even elite athletes can burn out if pushed too hard. This means that Yan could potentially capitalize if Merab overextends himself, gets injured, or encounters an unforeseen X factor during the fight. However, the current scenario heavily favors Dvalishvili. He's one of the standout stars in today's UFC, particularly against a weakened roster, which increases the appeal of a trilogy. This implies that Merab will prepare even more meticulously for Yan, increasing the likelihood of victory. Fans must also understand that the so-called resurgence of Yan is far from guaranteed. While he has tools and experience, his past bouts demonstrate a clear decline in rhythm, timing, and overall effectiveness. Against a top-level grappler like Dvalishvili, these weaknesses become critical. It's worth emphasizing one more time. Dvalishvili isn't just another opponent. He is methodical, intelligent, and relentless. He forces fighters out of their comfort zones and thrives on controlling the fight from start to finish. Yan's tendency to excel when dictating the pace is neutralized completely. In essence, unless Yan evolves drastically or capitalizes on an unusual opportunity during the fight, history suggests a repeat outcome. Dvalishvili overpowering Yan through persistent wrestling and controlled aggression.
Now, let's examine the deeper issues in Yan's fighting style and why Merab Dvalishvili poses such a unique challenge. One major problem is Yan's reliance on points-based fighting. He excels when he can land precise strikes and control exchanges. but against a high-pressure grappler who dictates pace and spacing, this approach falls apart. Dvalishvili embodies this problem for Yan perfectly. He doesn't allow opponents the room to set their rhythm. He overwhelms them with continuous forward pressure, forcing mistakes and punishing hesitation. Historically, Yan has shown vulnerabilities in grappling-heavy matchups. Against Aljamain Sterling, for example, his inability to manage ground control was apparent. He chased Sterling across the octagon in the opening round, attempting to impose his striking but failing to disrupt Sterling's countering strategy. In rounds 2 and 3, Yan's grappling weaknesses were brutally exposed. He only managed to recover some ground in rounds 4 and 5, which was far from enough to restore confidence in his skill set. This pattern of struggling against high-pressure grapplers reappears in every meaningful fight he's had since Cory Sandhagen. Merab Dvalishvili's style could be described as the anti-Yan formula. His attacking wrestling neutralizes point fighters, and his efficient striking complements his grappling, creating a multifaceted threat. Dvalishvili doesn't waste energy unnecessarily. Every movement has a purpose. His cardio allows him to maintain relentless pressure for the full duration of a fight, something Yan struggles to counter. Moreover, Dvalishvili has the advantage of camp continuity. He and his teammates, such as Aljamain Sterling, share strategies and insights that amplify their effectiveness. Yan, on the other hand, often trains in isolation or under inconsistent coaching conditions, which limits his adaptability. Critics might argue that Yan can still land a knockout or exploit a rare mistake, and they are correct. MMA is unpredictable. Yet, the likelihood is stacked heavily against him. Even in bouts against lighter or less grappling-focused opponents, Yan's rhythm is inconsistent. His fight against Song Yadong highlighted how a fast-paced, well-rounded striker with defensive awareness could challenge him. Against Dvalishvili, who combines relentless forward pressure with smart grappling, Yan's vulnerabilities become pronounced. Another key point is mental pressure. Yan has historically thrived when he dictates fights, but Dvalishvili's constant encroachment forces him into reactive modes. This not only reduces striking efficiency, but also increases the risk of errors and leaves him susceptible to takedowns and positional control. Unlike fighters who rely solely on striking, Dvalishvili's strategy is holistic. He pressures, controls, and strikes with equal intent. For a fighter like Yan, whose game plan depends heavily on timing and space, this approach is exceptionally problematic. Let's also consider fight frequency and preparation. Dvalishvili competes regularly, sharpening his skills with each bout. Yan, by contrast, has had periods of inactivity and relies on a camp system that does not always provide structured oversight. Even when active, Yan's reliance on sporadic sparring and self-directed training can leave gaps in both defensive and offensive execution. The contrast in preparation between the two athletes further tilts the scales in Merab's favor. Looking at previous patterns, it's clear why Dvalishvili has been so successful against fighters like Yan. Fighters with strong attack and grappling consistently dominate opponents who rely on timing and point-based at striking. Khabib Nurmagomedov, Charles Oliveira, and Islam Makhachev all illustrate this principle. Relentless pressure, combined with elite grappling, controls fights against even technically skilled strikers. Merab is no different. He adapts, maintains control, and exploits weaknesses in rhythm and positioning. Finally, consider fan expectations versus reality. Many supporters of Yan argue that he has a chance due to experience and power. While experience matters, it cannot fully compensate for structural weaknesses in preparation, adaptability, and pacing. Against a fighter like Dvalishvili, who has honed his craft and executes with consistency, Yan's tools are significantly blunted. The fight, therefore, is less about flashy moments and more about technical superiority and tactical execution. Dvalishvili has demonstrated both in spades. To understand the scale of Merab Dvalishvili's dominance, it's important to examine how he manages pressure and space inside the octagon. Unlike fighters who rely primarily on bursts of energy or flashy techniques, Dvalishvili operates with calculated efficiency. Every advance, every clinch, and every strike is designed to disrupt his opponent's rhythm. This is precisely what makes him so dangerous against Petr Yan, whose fighting style is highly dependent on controlling timing and distance. Yan thrives when he can dictate the pace, but Dvalishvili removes that control immediately. From the opening bell, he applies constant forward pressure, cutting off the cage, forcing clinches, and initiating grappling exchanges that Yan is ill-equipped to handle. Even when Yan attempts to counterstrike, Dvalishvili's superior conditioning allows him to maintain the offensive while absorbing minimal damage. This relentless approach has been observed in nearly every one of Merab's high-level fights, whether against top-tier strikers or fellow grapplers. A striking example of this can be seen in Dvalishvili's bout with Sean O'Malley. Despite O'Malley's technical striking and confidence in the stand-up game, he was repeatedly overpowered by Merab's relentless cage control and pressure. Dvalishvili didn't need knockout power to dominate. His grappling, positional control, and pace management were sufficient to neutralize his opponent. The same principle applies to Petr Yan. No matter how precise or powerful Yan's strikes are, if he cannot establish a rhythm, he becomes increasingly predictable and vulnerable. Moreover, Dvalishvili's cardio is not merely good by standard measures, it is elite. He conserves energy efficiently, making no unnecessary movements, and can maintain pressure throughout all 5 rounds of a fight. Yan, conversely, has shown signs of fatigue and reduced output in later rounds, particularly when forced to react defensively. In longer bouts where control is contested, this difference in conditioning becomes decisive. Let's not overlook strategy and camp knowledge. Dvalishvili and his teammates share insights and experience from previous fights, allowing him to anticipate his opponent's tendencies and plan counter strategies effectively. Yan's preparation, often self-directed or inconsistent due to gym limitations, lacks this level of strategic cohesion. This creates a gap in fight IQ application. Merab enters the octagon with a plan honed by shared expertise, while Yan must rely on individual execution under high-pressure circumstances. Even when analyzing Yan's comeback wins, cracks in his game are evident. Against Song Yadong, Yan struggled to impose his will early, requiring adjustments mid-fight to regain control. Against Davison Figueiredo, Yan couldn't secure a decisive finish despite the weight advantage and experience edge. And in his fight with McGhee, Yan's preparation and skill growth were insufficient to dominate a less-known opponent consistently. These patterns indicate a plateau in development, a crucial factor when facing a rising star like Dvalishvili, who continues to evolve and improve. Another critical aspect is mental fortitude under pressure. Yan historically excels when controlling the fight, but Dvalishvili's constant forward motion forces him into defensive responses. This reactive position leads to reduced offensive efficiency, increased errors, and vulnerability to takedowns. Merab's ability to dictate the fight's rhythm, regardless of opponent, ensures that Yan's strengths are consistently minimized. Dvalishvili's style also exemplifies modern MMA principles: relentless grappling combined with efficient striking. Fighters like Khabib Nurmagomedov, Charles Oliveira, and Islam Makhachev have shown that controlling pace and space neutralizes even the most precise strikers. Merab applies these principles to perfection, leaving little room for Yan to maneuver. The Georgian's ability to combine pressure, strategy, and conditioning into a single coherent approach makes him a formidable challenge for anyone, and particularly for a fighter like Yan, whose style is built around timing, points accumulation, and stand-up precision. In summary, the structural advantages Dvalishvili brings to the cage – pace control, grappling dominance, cardio efficiency, and strategic preparation – create a scenario where Yan must overcome not just an opponent, but a complete system designed to exploit his weaknesses. Without significant adaptation or the intervention of chance, History and technical analysis suggest a repeat of previous outcomes. Merab Dvalishvili controlling the fight and limiting Yan's effectiveness across every phase of combat.
Finally, let's break down the remaining factors that could influence the fight between Petr Yan and Merab Dvalishvili and what makes this matchup so compelling. While Dvalishvili's advantages are clear, MMA is never entirely predictable. Yan still possesses knockout power, precision striking, and championship-level experience. If Merab overextends, tires himself out, or suffers a momentary lapse in focus, Yan could capitalize. These are the rare X-factor moments that keep fans on edge, but they are exceptions rather than the rule. One potential concern for Merab is fight frequency and training load. Competing too often or engaging in overly intense training camps can lead to overtraining, fatigue, or even injury. Fighters like Canelo Alvarez in boxing have demonstrated how repeated, high-intensity competition without adequate recovery can diminish performance. While Dvalishvili's conditioning is exceptional, he is not immune to these physical limits. If his schedule is too packed, Yan could exploit small cracks in his armor, though it would require perfect timing and execution. Another variable is mental readiness. Merab thrives on control and pressure, but mental strain can affect even elite fighters. The expectation of a trilogy fight, which seems likely given UFC's current weak bantamweight roster and Dvalishvili's rising star power, adds stakes that could influence performance. Fighters often elevate their preparation for high-profile bouts, meaning Dvalishvili will enter the cage with a game plan fine-tuned to perfection. Yan, on the other hand, must overcome not just an opponent, but a strategy designed to neutralize his strengths. Let's also consider style matchups. Yan is most effective when he sets the pace, maintaining distance and scoring points with precise strikes. Dvalishvili's relentless grappling and ability to control space directly counter this style. Every takedown, every clinch, and every push forward removes the advantage Yan typically relies upon. This is why Dvalishvili has consistently outperformed other point-based fighters in the past. The Georgian's capacity to combine pressure with technical striking and superior grappling creates a scenario where Yan's traditional strategies are essentially nullified. Even looking at Yan's recent victories, we see patterns that suggest limits to his evolution. Against Song Yadong, his timing was off early and he only recovered in later rounds. Against Davison Figueiredo, despite the weight advantage, he failed to secure a decisive finish. With McGhee, his preparation was insufficient to dominate consistently. These examples demonstrate that Yan's growth has plateaued, and while he still has skills, they are no longer sufficient to reliably overcome high-level pressure fighters. Dvalishvili, conversely, is in a period of continuous improvement. His striking has become more efficient, his grappling remains relentless, and his cardio is unmatched. He moves purposefully, never wasting energy, and applies pressure intelligently. Stylistically, he fits the anti-Yan mold perfectly, combining physical dominance with strategic insight. This makes him a compelling candidate for victory in their upcoming match, particularly given Yan's demonstrated struggles under pressure. In conclusion, the fight's likely outcome favors Merab Dvalishvili. His superior conditioning, relentless pace, grappling expertise, and strategic preparation place him in a position to exploit Yan's weaknesses fully. Yan's only real chance lies in rare, high-impact moments, knockouts, sudden errors from Merab, or unforeseen X-factor circumstances. While MMA will always carry some unpredictability, the evidence from previous fights, stylistic matchups, and performance trends strongly points towards Dvalishvili controlling the fight and neutralizing Yan's strengths. Fans who expect a simple comeback story for Yan may be disappointed, but this is the nature of high-level MMA. Precise preparation, technical evolution, and tactical mastery often outweigh raw power or experience. Dvalishvili represents this principle in action. He applies pressure intelligently, manages space and timing, and maintains peak performance across all rounds. Against a fighter like Yan, who struggles when forced out of rhythm and under relentless grappling pressure, these factors create a near-perfect storm. Unless unexpected variables intervene, history and technical analysis suggest Merab will assert control and secure victory, making him the favorite in this December matchup.